All right, it's live.
Okay. So if everyone wants to mute their mic, I can begin. um, okay. So just let me know when you're ready to start recording, Lisa. Like, just wave your hand if you're.
Okay. Wait. So do you guys? We have to say our names first.
No. Oh, I thought we
already.
just said our name before we gave our speech.
Yeah, say that's good because you need a first and last name for each person when you do the evaluation. So each person, when they give their speech, should say their first and last name so we can put it in the evaluation thing.
Okay.
I think you just say it before you start your thing.
Perfect.
I already started recording.
That's
Okay,
fine.
that's fine.
All right.
It's no
Go
big
ahead,
deal.
Sarah, and I'll start now.
Okay. My name is Sarah Kearns. I'm talking about pornography. So the word pornography comes from the Greek for writing about prostitutes. However, how the term came to be isn't quite how it's used anymore. Pornography is any material, either pictures or words, that is sexually explicit. This can be tricky though, because depending on your culture, different things count as sexually explicit. For example, showing ankles in the Victorian time was explicit, but showing anatomy in textbooks for medical students isn't considered sexually explicit. So how can we define pornography to be what we understand it to be in our Western culture? Pornography is sexually explicit material, verbal or pictorial, that is primarily designed to produce sexual arousal in viewers. So I want to ask you, how would you feel if your spouse was viewing something so demeaning and wrong that it took away from what a great marriage you had? Did you know that 99% of men have viewed pornography in their life, and of those, 31% viewed it 3 to 5 times a week? Pornography is detrimental to a relationship because it takes something that is meant to be between two loving people and it brings in someone else. It may seem like it isn't a huge deal, but out of 100 people surveyed, 22% of them were separated or divorced, and others were contemplating leaving their partner as a result of a cybersex addiction. Marriage is about love and togetherness, and pornography takes that away because it takes the bond that you share and it gives it to something else. People who view pornography are 1.8 times more likely to have had multiple sex partners over the course of their lifetime and have had more than one sexual partner in the last few months. Pornography also takes the trust away in a relationship. When partners find out about their significant other's viewing habits in regards to pornography, they have reported feeling hurt, betrayed, rejected, abandoned, devastated, lonely, shamed, isolated, humiliated, jealous, and angry, as well as a loss of self-esteem. I knew someone who was viewing pornography, and it completely destroyed his marriage. It became such an addiction that he couldn't stop. Even when his wife found out, it didn't matter anymore to him. He just decided he didn't have to hide it any longer and would watch it even though he saw what it was doing to his marriage. His wife even let him know how much it hurt her, but by that point it didn't matter. When he first started, it didn't seem like that big of a deal. He didn't think it affected their relationship because he only viewed it a couple times and he still loved his wife very much. It's not even that he stopped loving her, but he didn't get aroused by just her anymore. The problem with pornography is that it takes intimacy from a physical bond to a mental loneliness. He could now only be intimate in his mind, and that slowly detracted from his relationship because after a while he just didn't care anymore. I tell this story in hopes to show you that pornography is not only addicting but detrimental to relationships and those you love. Can you imagine viewing it and your child catching you, or worse, can you imagine viewing it and knowing that at some point your child could view it also if they were to find what you had? Not only does pornography affect relationships and possibly your children, but it can affect your job too. Mary Eberstadt wrote an article about how pornography can cause social harm and how 84% of the 30% of bosses who said they fired someone for internet misuse and cited pornography as the reason why. Pornography can become such an addiction that it has to be watched all of the time, and it doesn't even matter if you're at your job. Do you want something in your life so addicting that you can't even get your work done because you have to watch it? The legality of pornography at the federal level has been traditionally determined by implementing the Miller test. This test dictates that the opinion of the local community on a specific pornographic piece is most important in determining its legality. Thus, if a local community determines a pornographic work to meet its standard for obscenity, then it is more likely to be banned. This means that a pornographic magazine that might be legal in California could be illegal in Alabama. This standard on pornographic legality is extremely difficult to uphold for the Internet, given that the Internet contains ubiquitous amounts of pornography. It has been argued that if the Miller test were applied to the Internet, then, in effect, the community standards for the most conservative community would become the standard for all U.S.-based websites. The first attempt to regulate pornography on the internet was the Federal Communications Decency Act of 1996, which prohibited the knowing transmission of indecent messages to minors and the publication of materials which depict in a manner patently offensive as measured by contemporary community standards sexual or excretory activities or organs, unless those materials were protected from access by minors, for example, by the use of credit card systems. Immediately challenged by a group of organizations spearheaded by the ACLU, both of these provisions were struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court in Reno versus American Civil Liberties Union. The indecent transmission and patently offensive material provisions were ruled to limit the freedom of speech guaranteed the First Amendment. The production of sexually explicit materials is regulated under 18 U.S.C. 2257, requiring original producers to retain records showing that all performers were over the age of 18 at the time of the production for inspection by the Attorney General. The 18 U.S.C. 2257 disclaimer is common on Internet sites distributing pornography, but the Department of Justice has rarely, if ever, enforced the provision. Although the law had been on the books for over 10 years, the Justice Department never actually inspected anyone. It was not until pressure from Congress and conservative religious groups spurred the administration of George W. Bush and Attorney General Gonzales to begin inspections of larger commercial porn companies, primarily in the Los Angeles area. Despite fearing mass inspections, harassment, and prosecution, the Justice Department inspected less than 24 companies out of several thousand operating, and no prosecutions resulted from any of the inspections. Retired FBI agents conducted the inspections and generally arrived with a list of videos whose records they wanted to examine. According to porn executives, the agents were always courteous and professional, suggesting changes or modifications to the company's record-keeping processes. Once Attorney General Alberto Gonzales left the Justice Department, the inspections ended. Therefore, what can we do to ensure that pornography is actually taken seriously? I propose we make sure that people are cited when they are producing what they shouldn't, and make it a point to not only protect children, but to protect families. If we work on advocating for families and children and show the potential they can become without this destructive habit, then we can begin to see change. In advocating, we can show the benefits of marriage between two people who are committed to each other, who don't use pornography as an escape, and children who grow up in a home where pornography isn't viewed. Showing statistics on those would help, but there are so many people who view pornography secretly that it may be next to impossible to prove. I can't hear. Go ahead.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
How do we get the email addresses?
Sorry. My email address, I can type it in the group chat.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. So does anyone have any questions for me? Lisa, you're still muted. So is Katie.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. It's hard to
Sorry.
manage everything at once.
No, you're fine.
Okay. So I guess we'll just type in our email addresses. Should we just do it right now?
Yeah, let's do.
Sure.
Sure.
Okay. All right, I'm clicking on it and I can't get mine to open up the chat box. Okay.
I sent mine, but I don't know where it is.
Yours came in a new chat box.
Oh, I
Who
don't
was
know.
that? Wait, who was that? Sarah?
No. I'm just on the video chat box.
Okay.
Sarah, what was the law, the policy, or the program that you talked about?
I talked about the. Let me pull it up.
Oh, I'm starting right now.
Okay, so I talked about the Federal Communications Decency Act of 1996, which prohibited the knowing of basically pornography to minors.
I have a question for you about the opposing view. I used to work at a daycare, and the lady that owned the daycare was older, and she said that her husband went to like strip bars or whatever. He did pornography, and she didn't care because she felt like that was his life and that we had nothing to do with it. So how do you address that it's their own life and it doesn't affect you?
I think I would view it more as in it affects everyone in a sense because it is such a harmful thing to just family and children in general. So just because children aren't going to strip clubs, it doesn't mean that that doesn't affect their life, seeing the billboards advertising about them for the other people. So I think in a way it affects everyone regardless if they're actually viewing a specific thing. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
That was great, thanks.
Okay. I have a question about. This thing is so hard to manage. I think it was concerning the opposing view.
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to get back to the question. I know that you offered advocating for families and children, but what were your specific alternatives? I didn't get any specifics.
So just near the end, I was talking about how specifically that pornography shouldn't be able to be accessed in the home, or especially it shouldn't be accessed at jobs, or to make sure that all pornography that is viewed has to be viewed by an adult, because kids can, there's a lot of pornographic sites that just say click if you're over the age of 18, and anyone can click that. And so having some way like the use of credit cards or some other more definite way to make sure that it's a lot harder to be viewed.
Thank you. Okay, we're 3 minutes into the questioning. Anyone have anything else?
I was thinking, like, what did you find that could be done to, like, stop the, like, ability of pornography getting on the internet and TV and all that kind of stuff? Like, what do you think can be done?
It's almost impossible to make it so it cannot be on the internet. The internet is so wide and like anyone can access it that it's near impossible. I think it just has to be kept so that children and minors cannot access it as easily as they do, because there's no way to really keep it from the internet.
Okay. I have a quick question. So, it kind of is similar to Amy's. What what do you say to someone who doesn't think that viewing pornography is bad? Like, how would you suggest helping them?
I would probably tell them that maybe they should evaluate their relationship a little more in depth because, well, for people who just want to hook up together, I mean, it won't really affect the relationship because they just view relationships or people as just hooking up. But for people who want a real connection and to be with someone in a relationship, it really will affect them in little ways that maybe they just don't see right now, but down the road it becomes worse.
Okay, we're at 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on
Yeah.
to Katie.
All right.
And then we have to submit, our evaluations, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Should we just wait? We might need a minute to submit and then re-log in.
No,
Yeah.
you don't have to re-log in. After you submit it, it says open in another response, and it'll just open another one for you. Click on that.
Oh,
And it'll
submit
open
another
one for
response?
you.
Is that what it's called?
It says open another response.
Oh.
Okay, this is really hard. Okay.
Okay, I'm just going to mute my microphone now. So.
Okay, Katie, let me know when you're ready and I'll time you.
Okay.
Did you see me, Sarah, when I did the 5? Oh, you're muted.
I did. Sorry.
Okay.
I did see that. It was very helpful, so thank you.
Okay. Okay. And then when we get to 6, I'll just do a 1.
Okay. Hold on a sec. All right. I'm ready. So, my name is Katie Andrews. Did you know that more and more married couples are choosing not to have children every year? There are several reasons, but the overarching motive is the attitude about having children. In 2007, the Pew Research Center did a survey that showed attitudes on whether children are key to a relationship. Only 41% of Americans said that children are very important to a successful marriage. Compare that to 65% in 1990. This has a direct link to lower fertility rates, which can have a devastating effect on society. And this is what I would like to address today. Soon after I got married, my husband and I decided to start having children. I've only been a mom for a year and a half, and we'll be having baby number 2 in October, but I have already seen how important children are and the benefits of having them. It has changed not only my perspective on life, but also made me realize the responsibility I have to help my children grow, learn, progress, and eventually become helpful people and good citizens that contribute positively to society. They are our future. According to the National Vital Statistics report published in December 2013, the 2012 total fertility rate for the United States was 1,880.5 births per 1,000 women. This is below the replacement level, which is considered to be 2,100 births per 1,000 women. If there isn't enough children to replace the population, what happens? Will it really make a difference whether or not you or your friends and neighbors choose to not have children? The answer is a definite yes, and there are many factors and consequences that come into play. If you were to Google effects of low birth rate, you would notice that most of the stuff that pops up would include the economy, and this isn't talking about a positive economic benefit. One of these is the housing industry. A journal titled Low Birth Rates in Japan and Italy talks about what has happened in these countries and what can happen in other countries who also have low birth rates. It pointed out that formation of new households would decline sharply. The demand for new apartments and new houses would also thereby decline sharply. That would have economic ramifications both in and beyond the critical housing industry. Another consequence, an aging population. Older people require more health care than young people, which would place a burden on the younger generation to help pay for this through taxes or other means. Other consequences include a decline in students, which affect the entire educational system, and also a pool of young adults who are job ready would be reduced. I realize that not having children may also have its benefits. These might include the freedom of spending more money on the other things that a couple wants, going on trips, not having the stress of getting kids ready for school, or dealing with boyfriends and girlfriends. Not to mention, for women, it would be easier to further their education and have a career, which would mean 2 stable and possibly full-time incomes. These may seem great, but in the long term they are only benefiting the couple and negatively contributing to long-term harmful effects on society. One thing that has been in place that may persuade couples to have children are the benefits they can receive when they file their taxes each year. TurboTax.com explains these benefits. It includes the dependency exemption, which allowed you to receive up to $3,900 in 2012, as well as the $1,000 child tax credit. They have been put in place by the federal government, but money once a year on a tax return may not be a big enough motivation for couples to start having children. What can you do to help this growing idea of not having children? Well, the most obvious thing is having children of your own. I would also suggest showing and sharing with your friends and neighbors how rewarding parenting can be. And in any situations, you can help them understand that children are important for you and for the future. Without them, society can't thrive. I would also suggest to contact your state legislatures and let them know that you are for family policies that protect families and children, that you realize the importance of having children and their role in society and the future. This can be done by going to your state government websites where their contact information can be found. Don't be silent about what you know. Your voice can make a difference.
Okay, so I have a question for you. Can we start that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how would you tell someone the importance of having children if they don't care about the tax benefits? If they just want it to be just them to their whole life, how would you persuade or let them know about the importance of children?
Well, I think because, money isn't going to always persuade people. I think helping them understand that it can affect the economy and it can affect, the future generations and how much the economy can thrive and how well and how society needs children who are taught by parents how to be responsible citizens and things like that. That it's not just whether or not you want to be a parent, it's more related to also the community and society in general, kind of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I have a question for you. Many people believe that having children is such a burden on the mother, and and it takes away from her rights as an human and an individual. How would you, what do you say to that? Sorry, can you hear me?
Sorry, you froze for a second.
You took my question, Amy.
Can you say the second part again? I didn't get the whole thing.
Yeah. I just said, what would you say to feminists who feel like women deserve more than just being at home and going through the physical hardships and of being a mother and not being able to experience the world?
I would tell them that raising children is actually a pretty important job because um, it helps them to have children that are responsible people. But not only that, I had an idea in my head. I can't remember. That it's not necessarily infringing on their rights because maybe after their children that are all grown up and out of the house, they can go and work or they can still get an education while having children as well if they want to further their education. But they're really women are natural nurturers and it's kind of hard to replace that with the man who may not have the same tendencies as a woman does.
I have a bizarre question for you, a what if.
Okay.
Since we get tax breaks for having children, and a lot of people take advantage of that, do you think that in the future the government will start offering tax breaks for not having as many children, like in some places they do, like in China where they limit families? Did any of your research lead to that?
No, nothing talked really about that, but I think it probably is possible just because of the way things are going.
Wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah.
All right, we have one more minute for questions.
So.
What other incentives do you think could be done to stop this from happening and encouraging people to have children?
I don't know. That's a hard question because money is a good motivation, but it's not going to motivate everybody. So probably helping them, kind of like what I said with Sarah's question, just helping them realize that it is rewarding and that they can do a lot of good by having children more than they can hurt, I guess. I don't know. So.
Okay, we're at 5 minutes. Okay, can we finish up Katie's and submit and start on Amy?
Okay.
Just
right.
a side note. Oh, never mind. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead. Do you have?
Oh, I was just gonna ask Katie when she was due.
October 19th.
Because I'm due October 26th.
Wow. That's cool.
All right. Carry on.
Okay. Tell me when I can start, Lisa, or do I just start?
Yeah, let me get. I'm so worried about the time. I need to do my final feedback. Hang on.
Okay.
Are you guys typing a whole lot on here? I'm not having a chance to really get much in.
Just a sentence or two, or just
Okay.
one, really.
Okay. Submitting right now. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. I come from a family of 3 girls, no boys at all. So you can imagine that we are a pretty close, tight-knit bunch. And my sisters went on a service trip to Africa without me because I was too young to go. And I was hanging on their every word when they got back home. And they told me all about how they hiked Mount Kilimanjaro and all these different things that they did. But the thing that struck me the most was when they talked about how the children who were on their way to school were not safe and would be raped on their way to school. And they also talked about how just even adults going around were not safe in the community. And they talked about orphans who were without their families because of death from AIDS. And there was a study done on unwanted pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections among young women in rural Kenya, Africa. And the results were that many girls had infections like HIV and sexually transmitted diseases and had been with multiple partners. This study talked about how premarital sex with multiple partners puts girls at risk and of unwanted pregnancy and infection by sexually transmitted infections like HIV/AIDS. It showed that abstinence before marriage is the best way to prevent HIV, STDs, and unwanted pregnancies. In Uganda, the president of the nation created a policy called the ABC policy: abstinence, be faithful, and use a condom. This education was followed by the people of his nation, and the results were amazing. They actually lowered their HIV infection rate while the rest of the world's HIV infection rate went up. This also shows that abstinence is better than what other nations are being taught, which they're being taught sexual promiscuity through government policies, and like I said, their HIV transmitted diseases rates are rising. So I wondered how a society could get to the point where they were that unsafe. The truth is that since monogamy will protect you from a myriad of diseases, and since abstinence is the only way to protect yourself 100% from these illnesses, that we need to be protecting our societies from illnesses. But organizations like Planned Parenthood plan to increase education through the United Nations for what they call sexual rights. This is only part of their proposed policies. Encourage acceptance and exploration of diverse sexual orientations and gender identities. Promote condoms as safe without disclosing their failure rates. And promote abortion as safe without consequences. Encourage youth to advocate for sexual rights and teach youth without parental knowledge or consent under the guise of confidentiality and privacy rights. And to promote sexual pleasure as a right and an important component of sexual health. All of this sex education is policy being considered, and in some places already implemented by the United Nations. The most concerning part is that this education is done without parental consent and is giving children the entitlement for sexual promiscuity, which we know leads to illness, broken families, orphans, and can even cause death through AIDS. So it is well known that sex can become an addiction, and yet so can food. And we see policies both release dopamine, and our government is advocating for healthy eating through different things, like on Sesame Street, when the president's wife gets up and talks about eating healthy, or through the schools and the new policies out about how to eat healthy and what schools can and can't serve. So why are they doing this? It's because they know that heart disease is the leading cause of death in America. So why would Americans eat themselves into disease? Well, it's because eating can become an addiction. So knowing that sex can become an addiction, why would we actively promote the addiction of sex as a society? We all want to be safe and live, and none of us want the reality that so many third world countries face, like our African friends, of families dying from AIDS and orphans, and people being raped on the street because they don't understand abstinence. So is this an extreme, or are we simply riding a slippery slope to an uncivilized sexual world by promoting things like Planned Parenthood has, and not following the ABC program? So please advocate for abstinence, faithfulness, and faithfulness after marriage for the sake of mankind. And please contact your local and international government organizations, even the United Nations, and let them know that you want to live free from worry of AIDS. And for the sake of your family, please be abstinent before marriage and faithful after marriage.
Can I ask a question?
That was 5:32. I forgot to unmute last time when you were doing it. 5 minutes, 32 seconds. Okay. You guys ready for questions?
Yeah.
What were your some of your suggestions to stop this or implement?
So the abstinence, be faithful, use a condom, and the alternatives for solutions was for each individual to be abstinent, and for us to advocate that in our government and at our United Nations level.
So I have a question. How do you teach the importance of abstinence to people without teaching them about sexual education? Because you kind of explained how teaching all these things can become a problem, teaching them in schools without the parents' consent and everything. But then how do the children learn? Because if they don't know anything, do you think that can cause a problem too? Because they just be curious? Or
So your question is, how do you teach abstinence without teaching them about sex?
But still be able to teach them about the basics of sex without making them without causing too many problems.
Okay, so the basics of sex would be okay, and in fact in Uganda that's what they did. They taught the basics of sex, and everybody knew that. But the problem is through the Planned Parenthood that I quoted was that they sexual rights and entitlements for sex whenever you want it with whoever you want. So it's not about just simply sex. It's about creating entitlements in families and children and individuals that leads to chaos like we saw in Africa.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. Do you think that we'll get back around to, with the epidemics, the AIDS epidemic, and then seeing how well it worked in Africa to go with abstinence as opposed to giving them condoms and things that they could still use? Do you think that the U.S. will take a look at that and maybe change their ideas about sex education in schools, primarily high schools?
I think that they should, because I don't know that they will, but statistically they should, because it's about health. I mean, it's not even about what is good or what kind of rights you have for pleasure. It's about the health of a society. And if they're looking at the statistics of how a society can be healthy and can survive and not even contract diseases like AIDS, then they definitely should be looking at that.
Did you find any research, or did you come across anything that maybe had the opposite opposing view, like how maybe sex or having multiple sex partners or anything like that could be a benefit? I mean, I doubt there's any.
I actually did in a research article called "In Family Change During an Unwed Teenage Pregnancy." The studies found that families with unwed pregnancies tend to be more cohesive. So having multiple partners or having a child out of wedlock, an unwanted pregnancy, brought the family together because it reported having better relationships with their mothers, their fathers, their siblings, and during the first year of pregnancy. So yeah, I did find some studies there. And what that is that's when a teenager brings home their child to their family. And I think that I think the reason behind that is because the family has to become cohesive. they have to work together in kind of a crisis situation in a child that was unplanned. And
Yeah.
they have to work at it. And the parents become a parent again, and everybody falls in love with this sweet, innocent baby. But yeah, that study showed that.
Wow. That's
Okay. We're at 4:40. Any other questions?
I don't think we have to go the full 5 minutes. I think that's just the maximum amount we can go.
Okay, did everyone get a chance? I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
everyone asked the question.
Okay, having a little trouble here, like getting everything together. I just did 2 full days of Book of Mormon reading with our young women, and we did that readathon. My brain is shot, so. All right, I'll just go ahead and time myself. I'm going to put my phone up ahead of me so that I can see.
I have a quick question. I don't have to submit a thing on me, right?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
No.
I'm not doing one on me. So. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm Lisa Ball, and I am doing a persuasive speech on divorce and the value of marriage. Does divorce really make people happy? Are children really better off down the road after their parents divorce? After initiating some intense research efforts concerning the effects of divorce on families, I would have to surmise that by and large, the answer to both questions would be a resounding no. Having been an elementary school teacher for over a decade now, whose primary interest is with the overall positive well-being of children, I have witnessed many situations in which families have been nearly torn apart by divorce. My once normal and happy little children often fall victim to becoming the proverbial ping-pong ball between unhappy and self-centered parents. This has truly broken my heart as I notice the obvious decline in my students' performances at school, relationships with their friends, and overall level of happiness. Smiles are often replaced by frowns and excitement by depression. Some have even suggested to me that the preposterous idea that perhaps they are the cause of their parents' unhappiness. I think I think to myself, how can I sit back and let this go on? Childhood should be a time of fond memories filled with love and happiness, not memories of quarreling, hatred, and eventual depression. Therefore, I would ask you to join me in first considering some of the potential reasons for the breakdown of the family, and then exploring methods and strategies by which we can put a stop to this destructive train wreck that's plaguing today's family society. Did you know that one of the #1 fears of children between the ages of 14 and 16 is the fear that their parents may divorce? From the National Survey of Families and Households, researchers discovered that out of 5,232 married adults who considered themselves unhappy in their marriages, many became separated just a short time later, some resorted to divorce, and a select few diehards decided to stick it out. According to the family relations researcher Linda J. Waite, a well-respected author and professor of urban sociology from Michigan State University, 2 out of 3 unhappily married adults who avoided divorce or separation ended up happily married 5 years later. Just 1 out of 5 unhappy spouses who divorced and separated had happily married in the same time period. She stated further that because marital strife takes a toll on physiological well-being, the conventional wisdom would argue that unhappily married adults who divorce would be better off, happier, less depressed, with greater self-esteem and a stronger sense of personal mastery compared to those staying married. This was not found to be the case. In this published study by Linda Waite and her colleagues, they found that unhappily married adults who divorced or separated were no happier on average than unhappily married adults who stayed married. Divorce did not reduce symptoms of depression for unhappily married adults or raise their self-esteem or increase their sense of mastery on average compared to unhappy spouses who stayed married. The vast majority of divorces, 74% to be exact, happened to adults who had been happily married 5 years previously. Many currently happily married spouses have had extended periods of marital unhappiness, often for quite serious reasons, including alcoholism, infidelity, verbal abuse, emotional neglect, depression, illness, and work reversals. With a fervent quest to learn more about divorce statistics and investigate why this has increased substantially over the past 40 years, I discovered that one of the main catalysts for an increase in divorce is actually the no-fault divorce laws that were adopted quickly by 41 states back in the early to mid-1970s. This rapid adoption was highly encouraged and almost pushed at the federal level as well. This introduced the term irreconcilable differences to American society. With no-fault divorce, one spouse could actually file and petition for divorce for any reason, while the other, who may still show an interest in keeping the family together, has no voice. This just doesn't seem right to me, and it clearly isn't. These laws actually launched the divorce rate into an overdrive and provided a quick and easy way for families to be split apart and essentially ripped away at the seams. A paper published in the Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy, written by Douglas Allen, noted that in just 2 years following the adoption of the no-fault divorce, the national divorce rate increased sixfold. Such a law doesn't seem to have a positive outcome for families. So what can we as a society do to help married couples develop a sense of value toward their marriages and make more of an effort to keep this essential family tie from an unwinding? Well, we can educate them, get politically involved, and inspire them to keep holding on to that which is good. We can advocate a much-needed no-fault divorce reform at the state level, which proposes to require couples to give way to a waiting period before divorce proceedings can even begin. Remember now, statistics show that of those who took more time to consider divorce, 2/3 of them stayed together and reported happy, healthy marriages. I also found a few ways that we might encourage unhappy couples to combat that nagging societal need for divorce and rekindle their reason for marrying in the first place. I really like what Dr. Phil had to say. He said relationships are not 50-50. That's just some politically correct thing that we decided to start saying in the 80s when we decided to fix the marriage plan and led us to double-digit divorce rates. Marriage is 100%, 100%. And I say that because you are responsible for yourself in the marriage. You are responsible for what you bring to the marriage and for what you elicit from your partner, what you maintain or allow with your partner. You need to look at you. Marriages are fixed from individuals healing from the inside out. I also appreciate this advice from relationship expert Mort Fertel. Many people wonder, did I marry the right person? But that's the wrong question. The key to succeeding in a marriage is not finding the right person, it's learning to love the person you found. Love is not a mystery. Just as there are physical laws of the universe, like gravity, which governs flight, there are also relationship laws that, depending on your behavior, dictate the outcome of your marriage. You don't have to be lucky in love. It's not luck, it's a choice. And finally, I would suggest a few simple yet effective strategies offered by the American Psychological Association for making marriages stronger and happier. Know that a little goes a long way. Fight nicely. Talk about more than dishes. Celebrate good times. Take risks. Know that love is not enough. If for no other reason, I would hope that we could someday convince married couples to seriously consider the short and long-term effects that divorce can have on their children. There are many more distressing statistics that I have not shared with you today. Please join my efforts to advocate marriage and combat divorce through proper education and by specifically promoting no-fault divorce reform through our state legislators. Divorce does not make people happy, but it is an absolute certainty that family can. Advocating marriage by educating couples concerning the real facts and using effective strategies to preserve marriage can help strengthen families as well. And therefore, I would venture to boldly conclude that saving our families is a guaranteed way to increase our overall happiness and satisfaction for the entire human race. Okay, I think I started my thing early, but I couldn't tell. So I might have gone over a few seconds. Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
So there's probably a lot of couples out there who got a divorce and either remarried or their family situation improved. So do you think there is exceptions? Like, do you think sometimes it's okay to get divorced?
Actually, I do, and I found out that a lot of marriage counselors, including Dr. Phil, would recommend that people get divorced if they just absolutely were not meant for each other and they just can't work it out. So I think that there can be happiness in further marriages after divorce. But when there are children involved, I think they really need to stop and think about it a little bit longer and give it time. People are just too quick nowadays to just say, okay, it's not working, we're out of here. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have a question. So what would you say to someone who their family or their significant other wants to get a divorce but they don't want to? How would you help them to understand or to cope with that?
Yeah, that kind of would be a case-by-case basis, but I think that's why the no-fault divorce reform would help in that situation, because it would require, I mean, think about how long some people take to make the decision to get married. Some people do it in no time at all, but like my husband and I, we ended up taking about 6.5 years to decide whether or not we wanted to get married, and we did. And I think that it needs to be given a little bit more time. And maybe that time will help the other person to understand that it's just not going to work, and then maybe they could be more prepared to move on. I just think people are hit too hard with divorce, especially those who are still in love. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Did you find any correlation between people that cohabitated before marriage and divorce? Like if they...
Actually, not in this research, but in some research in another class, I found that I think they said there's a really high, like 80% of people who cohabitate before marriage end up in divorce. It was a really, really high number. It might have even been more than that, but I can't remember exactly. I know I have a friend who did the same thing. She cohabitated with her future husband for about 5 years. They got married, and within the first year, they were divorced. And she was already pregnant, so that was really kind of sad to me. So there's no security in cohabitation.
Okay, so I have a question for you. You said you didn't like the no-fault divorce law, but my understanding is before that it was basically, you can't get divorced at all, or in some societies it's been that only the husband has the authority to call for divorce for any reason, and it throws the wife under the bus. So I would think that would make the no-fault divorce law better. So,
well, there were some benefits to the no-fault divorce law, and it did provide people with a little bit more stability as far as divorce is concerned. But some of these quick divorces that were a result of the no-fault divorce law they were launching the mother, who was pretty much left with the kids most of the time. It was launching the mother into poverty. And I'm not saying that divorce over the long term, it doesn't, lead them to that as well, but I'm saying that they had more time. If they would have more time when they had more time for the divorce to be finalized, they would have more time to get their act together and, start getting themselves on their feet. Did that answer your question, Amy?
perfectly, thank you.
Okay. All right, I think I didn't time this. I'm sorry. I think we're over, or we're at least at the 5 minutes. Any other questions? Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're on to Allison.
Mine's not as formal as y'all, so.
Allison, I don't have your email address up here.
It's
Pinkheart, PINKHEART 2210 at Hotmail.
Okay.
Is that what it is? I put it in the chat, Allison.
And what's your last name? Will you just spell it for me?
LANDSIEDEL.
Okay. All right, are you ready?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to start now.
Okay, my speech is about sex education in schools, and there are 2 different types of sex education. And the first one is they teach abstinence only, And then the second one it's called comprehensive sex education, and they teach about abstinence, but they do it in a little bit of a different way. I'll go back to that. First, some of the history of sex education. It's been around since the 1800s, and some parents were told to teach their children about sex education because there was a rapid inflation of people from the rural areas into the cities, and so there were more children in closer proximity to each other, and they were having more peer pressure and temptations and stuff. So I guess the government wanted parents to teach their children about proper proper sexual standards. I don't think they went into all the details, but they just told them how you're supposed to deal with the opposite, like sex. Next, in 1913, Chicago became one of the first major cities to instate sex education in schools. But they didn't talk about sex or anatomical knowledge. They just talked about, I guess, the roles of male and female, like boys and girls. Just like, I guess, not their parts, but just like how you're supposed to act and respect the opposite sex. And we go down through the years. In 1914, the government was forced to address the issue of sex education because in World War I, many soldiers were found with STDs, and they weren't really educated on how you get those, so they were wanting to implement sex education for soldiers, and they eventually wanted to take it onto the schools, just so that the children and adults and minors or whatever are aware of education, sex education, and some things that can happen due to sex. In the 80s, there was a pandemic of AIDS and HIV, and this just enforced supporters, because there were supporters behind sex education, and most people didn't want it implemented in schools. But that pandemic forced them to actually rethink about wanting sex education implemented into schools. And then in 2010, I'm just going to jump ahead, in 2010, there was $75 million given to schools to implement comprehensive sex education into the school systems. Pretty much every state in the United States has some law about sex education in schools, but it's determined on each state. So some states, for example, have actual facts, medical facts, teaching to the children, and then some really don't. They just talk about the parts and all of that kind of stuff. Not really like the importance of it and stuff. One book, I watched several documentaries, I guess you could call them, about this topic, and one book was called It's Perfectly Normal, and it was in a library of one of the schools in, I think it was Chicago, and there were very explicit pictures of nudity of children, adults, and there's pictures of positions, and crazy stuff like teaching them how to masturbate and all this kind of crazy stuff. It was in the school library, and the parents didn't even know about it. And so it just took one dad to actually say, we don't really want this in our school system because that's not really what the community stood for. And he's trying to get it taken out of the school. So now if you want your child to check out that book, you actually have to sign a waiver allowing them to actually check out the book. There's also something else that they want to implement into schools for third graders or kindergartners, and kindergartners are like 5 years old, and they wanted to teach them the pleasures of sex. And I just found this to be very crazy. Like, they're teaching them all this kind of crazy stuff. Here I'm going to move ahead to the two different types and what each one of them entails. They basically almost teach the same thing, but they just teach it in a different way. The comprehensive sex education, they teach that it's natural, it's normal, and it's healthy. Of course it is, but I don't think they're teaching it in like a sacred way, like we would teach it as Mormons. They're just teaching it. It's everyone's going to do it, so you might as well have protection, or you might as well know what's going to go on if you actually end up engaging in sex. Abstinence only is a little bit to the extreme. They teach that abstinence is the only way to go about sex. Like, just don't do it at all. Like, don't even think about it. Don't do it. It's harmful to you. It's harmful to society, and there's consequences that come from it. They don't really teach the importance of sex to children. So, this is a big issue, and it has been a big issue for many, many years. And one of the statistics that I found was 32.2 million teenage girls ages 14 and 19 have had one or more of the 4 different STDs. So even though they are being taught some sort of sex education in the schools, the rates of abortions and teen pregnancy are still very high. As a nation, the United States, we have the highest teen pregnancy and abortion rates from any country in the world. But it's because there's two different issues. Some people want to teach abstinence only, and then some other people want to teach the comprehensive type. And I was reading on a blog that this one guy said that yes, it is important to teach them that stuff, but they're not teaching them how to actually have a relationship or hold on to a relationship or nourish a relationship with another person. They're just teaching, oh, if you're going to have sex, this is the proper way to go about it with condoms and birth control and all of that kind of stuff. So therefore, I would just want to say that it comes down to the parents, and it comes down to the parents taking the proper role in teaching their children what they want. And I would rather not the government infringe on these rights, because the parents have the right to teach their children the proper education about sex and the proper way to go about that. Thank you.
Okay. Did you see me giving you the signs?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
So my question is kind of that like, based on what you said, like, it is important to understand sex education, but do you think it's something that, maybe you kind of already answered this, but do you think it's something that should be just taught at home, or do you think the school has any say in it, at least when it comes to maybe high school, not elementary?
For me, it just depends. Like, I think it's very important to be taught at home, but one of the documentaries I was watching was in Chicago, they're trying to force this down the parents' throats to have their children taught this. But the lady that was in an interview, she said, Chicago school districts are suffering more other than learning sex education. Math rates are going down, their reading rates are going down. So why are they pushing this when there's other more important vital things like math and reading and science and bringing up those scores for children? Hopefully that answered your question. I just think as a member of the church, it's important for you to teach your children the proper way, and that it's a sacred thing, and it's not to be done lightly. There are consequences sometimes that can happen from it. You can get a sexually transmitted disease, get pregnant, you have to deal with all those different things, and it brings it into your family. And so they're taught the proper way and not in such a crude way. Like, from what the readings that we've had in this class and what I've been reading, they're just teaching them very crude ways, like positions, and teaching them how to masturbate and have orgasms and all this kind of crazy, outlandish stuff that if the parents taught them the proper way, that I think they would get a better, full encompassing understanding of what actually it entails.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Next.
I had a question. I completely lost it. My question was, you suggested that abstinence, like Amy was talking about, wasn't enough, that it was a bit extreme. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
So yes, like the abstinence part, yes, they do take it to extreme, and they make the children feel guilty and ashamed if they do have sex, and they can't really go to their parents or to other people to talk about it. And yes, when I was a teenager, that's a very uncomfortable subject to talk about with your parents. So like having that education class in school, it helped me, but they didn't go into details like they're wanting to do now. Like we just learned about, it was separate classes. The girls had a class and the boys had a class. We never had a class together, and we never talked about crazy, crude things. So I just think it's important to teach about relationships, and that abstinence is the best way to go about it, but don't take it to the extremes of making them feel shameful or guilty of having sex if they actually do have sex. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, so teach them, abstinence, but also don't make them feel like they're dirt because they made a mistake, and teach them repentance. Is that what you're saying? Okay, thanks.
Perfect.
I had a question too, and I can't remember what it is.
While you're thinking, Katie, I can ask one.
Okay.
Okay. I just was going to ask, you talked about religion and how things can be taught in a sacred way, but what about people who are not religious?
Yes. Well, my personal viewpoint on that is having the educators that are actually teaching the curriculum teach it in a proper way, that like have approved curriculum, not like the curriculum that they have is very, very like out there. The LGBT, I think it is, like the gay and lesbian rights and all that group or whatever, they're the ones I think that are wanting to teach all this crazy stuff, because they don't want really gender roles anymore, like male and female. They want just basically people. And so, oh, phooey. Sorry, my computer's about to die. I have to plug it in really quick. Okay. Could you answer your question again, please? Sorry.
I just asked about religion. I said, what about people who aren't religious, who don't care how, if it's presented in a sacred way? Wouldn't that kind of education be okay for them?
It just depends. Like, from what I found, they're really taking it away from the parents. And so if the parents had more of a say of, I don't want my child to go to this class, the ones that are religious, that would be fine. And the parents that aren't religious, they could say, yes, I want my child to be taught this. I didn't really find really much research on that. Like, I just think it should be left up to parents to decide if they want their child to be taught this curriculum. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, thanks.
I still can't remember. So I guess I don't have one.
Okay. think we're up on our time anyway. All right. So we're done, right?
Yeah.
Ooh. That was
Y'all's
rough.
were really good. I didn't prepare mine like that, but y'all's were really good. I liked all of y'all's.
Thank you. You know what? Your information was really, you know a lot about how sex education is facilitated in schools. And since I work at a private school, I don't know that much about it other than what my son learned in high school, which his sex education was pretty much out in the courtyard.
Yeah, like I just remember in school taking that class, and it was nothing like they're wanting to do now. Like I didn't learn about masturbation or orgasms or any of that kind of stuff, and I don't think it's appropriate to show children positions and all of that kind of stuff. Like it needs to be taken with the parents. And one of the ladies said that what's this world coming to? Like the parents' role is totally being taken away. Like yes, it is uncomfortable to talk about sex with your children, but you just have to like man up or woman up, and I would rather it come from me than some crazy teacher that doesn't have the same values and standards that I do.
So
That's like twisted and stuff.
are our reviews supposed to come email?
What's that?
Didn't I hear our reviews are supposed to come automatically to our email or no? Like
I think they go to her and then they go to our email maybe.
okay. Well, gosh, I think we all did great. Thanks so much for everything.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, you guys.
Night, guys.
Night.
Bye.